situation in Sicily is particularly prone to slave revolts because Sicily is an agricultural breadbasket. I think I've told you this. Sicily is one of three major grain-producing provinces of the Roman Empire. At this point, the Romans have two of those. They have Sicily, which they gained in the First Punic War. They then get North Africa in the second and really the third Punic War, and then the third breadbasket, which is Egypt, they don't have yet, but they will get it by the time we get to the end of this class. And that's where the vast majority of grain is produced. Cereals are produced in the Mediterranean. So obviously, if you want to have agricultural slaves, they are going to go naturally to these breadbaskets. So Sicily is full of agricultural slaves. Now, the types of guys that are working on the fields, of course, are the men that have just been conquered in Rome's wars. In particular, if we're talking about 135, right, Rome has spent the last, 6.5 decades conquering in Macedonia and conquering in Spain. So the vast majority of these slaves are almost certainly from those parts of the world, and they are former warriors. Okay? That's not going to help with the whole slave revolt situation because we have people who likely have some military training and military ability. It doesn't help either that Sicily had been kind of overrun by sort of the most profiteering type of Roman landlord that you could find. These are people that have been recently brought into Sicily, right? Sicily had been largely Phoenician and Greek. And during the First and Second Punic Wars, most of those Phoenicians and Greeks had been gradually supplanted by Roman landowners coming in. And, these are landowners that are not, that are not spending a lot of time on these estates. They already own estates in Italy. These are just like cash producing farms that produce crops that are then sold on the market. These people don't really want to spend a lot of time there. So, right, you have absentee landlords that don't really care about how the farms are run, and you have these like warriors that are working on that soil. This is a very volatile mix. Obviously, the slaves are treated very, very harshly in these on these farms in Sicily. The slaves that are operating there are so badly treated and so underfed that they're having to steal from the small farmers that are around Sicily as well. So there's agitation between the Roman landowners and the few remaining small landowners in this area. So it is a really bad situation. And when one of the Roman landlords has a Syrian slave, and his name is Eunus, okay? Eunus is a Syrian that comes all the way from the Near East, and he's kind of a magician. He's like an entertainer and a magician, and he would do tricks for his Roman master when he came to visit, and if the Roman master brought his friends, Eunus would do this whole routine where he would say, and I'm also, I know I look like a slave, but I'm really the king of Sicily, and everyone would laugh at this, and he'd say, okay, you're laughing now, but if just tip me on the way out, because when I take my kingdom, I'll spare the lives of anybody who gives me a tip. And everybody would laugh at this. And what happens is Eunus decides to revolt against his Roman master. He lives in a small town, and about 400 slaves join Eunus's revolt. We're told that they are particularly brutal with the inhabitants of the town. So here we see they collected 400 of their fellow slaves. This is Eunus and his band. And they burst fully armed into the city of Enna. That's the city where Eunus lived. Leading them and performing tricks with flames of fire for them, they stole into the houses and wrought great slaughter. They spared not even babies, but tore them from the breast and dashed them to the ground. So this is right. The slaves that had been brutally treated are now going after even the infant family members of their former masters. It cannot be expressed, Diodorus of Sicily says, with what wanton outrage they treated wives before the very eyes of their husbands. So also, obviously, we have rape going on too. They were joined by a large throng of the slaves in the city, who first visited the extreme penalty upon their masters and then turned to murdering others. So all this happens in 135 BC. And Eunus is so successful and such an inspiring and charismatic figure that in the south of Sicily also a bunch of slaves revolt. Thousands of slaves end up revolting and flocking to this guy's banner. He decides indeed to call himself the King of Sicily. He takes on a new name because he is Syrian, and the Syrians were currently ruled by a dynasty called the Seleucids, and the names of those monarchs were often Antiochus. So Eunus changes his name to Antiochus, and he actually mints coins. You can actually see on your screen some of the bronze coins minted by this former slave who sets up an independent kingdom, taking over the vast majority of the landmass of the island of Sicily. He is very successful. Eventually, Rome obviously has to send armies into Sicily to deal with an uprising that is now probably numbering around 100,000 slaves that have rebelled against their masters. A consular army is sent. Antiochus now, his army, his slave army defeats this consular army. Then a series of armies led by praetors are sent one by one in succession. 4 different armies led by 4 different praetors over the course of 135 to 133 are sent. All 4 of those armies are defeated by these Sicily-based slaves. So it is an intransigent uprising there on the island of Sicily. Finally, the Romans send a second consular army, several legions, and they are able to finally capture Eunus/Antiochus, and they plan on bringing him back to Rome to execute him in front of everybody. He dies of disease before they can do this, and with the death of Eunus, his kind of subordinates are not able to hold on to all of this territory. The Romans begin capturing city after city. They end up finally getting back to Enna, which is like the main stronghold, kind of the last area of defense for the slave revolt. And eventually the remaining slaves are captured. The Romans will crucify the remaining slaves left alive, probably about 10,000 slaves. The crucifixion, as I'm sure many of you know, right, is being hung up publicly on a cross, or in some cases, like the cross is more like a T, and just nailed up there, and basically in such a way that a person sort of slowly suffocates, trying to hold themselves up, to just avoid the extreme pain of being stabbed in the wrists and down by the ankles. And it's just slow, excruciating, and very embarrassing public way to die. It normally is a very slow and painful death. So 10,000 slaves or so are crucified, and by the year 132, this revolt has finally dissipated. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I encourage you, if you'd like to get more free Roman history content, check out my podcast, the Pax Romana Podcast, P-A-X Romana Podcast. It is available anywhere you can find podcasts, so Spotify, Apple Music, all of those places. And if you would, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment. You can also subscribe to the channel, and all of those things will help boost the channel in the YouTube algorithm. Finally, if you're interested in following me on X, you can do so by looking for me at Prof CPE, P-R-O-F CPE. Thanks so much for watching the video. We'll catch you next time.